If you watch racing, you've seen what it looks like during a race and maybe even practice and qualifying, but what about the other parts of a weekend? Well, for the travel crew, there's actually quite a bit more that goes into it. So let's talk about it. Now all of this can vary from weekend to weekend, so it kind of depends on what the schedule is for that particular weekend, whether we practice and qualify on Friday or just go through tech inspection and do it all on Saturday. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a specific race weekend schedule and see what all we have in store for us. These schedules are actually sent to us by NASCAR, and they obviously set the schedule for what's going to happen this weekend. So this is where all the teams will get started planning for a weekend. So let's just take this weekend schedule at Texas Motor Speedway as an example. To start off with, most teams do fly private. It's not like there's a stocked minibar and couches along the airplane or anything like that like you might see in the movies. They really are just a smaller version of a commercial airliner, but the biggest benefit is they operate on our schedule, not a set schedule. So they can actually leave whenever everybody boards the plane. Now some teams do fly commercial, and I have as well. Typically for those, you will leave on Thursday because you have to be at the racetrack Friday morning, and you will fly back Sunday morning, just to make sure that if the race goes long on Saturday, you don't miss your flight home. But if you fly private, you will probably fly with a company called Victory Air. They specify in carrying race teams all around the country. Some of the bigger teams do own their own planes. I know Joe Gibbs and Stuart Haas used to. But for the most part, most teams will fly Victory. In our example here, team access is permitted at 10:30, and we'll usually want to land roughly an hour before the team access is permitted, just to allow us time to stop for breakfast on the way in if we need to. So in this case, that would mean we have to land around 9:30, and for Texas, it's about a 2-hour flight, roughly, so that means we would have to leave at 7:30. However, there's another wrinkle in the formula here: time zones. We travel across time zones fairly regularly, and since most all teams are going to start in the Eastern time zone, being from North Carolina, that actually adds up to an 8:30 time for us to leave. If we leave at 8:30 in the morning, most people will get there about a half hour early, as this is when boarding starts, if not a little bit sooner. So that means you need to get to the airport around 8 o'clock. Now these cases aren't so bad. But there are times when team access is a lot earlier in the morning, so once you factor in the time of flight and everything like that, it makes for a pretty early morning sometimes. So as you can see, the first thing listed here for our Xfinity series is the haulers entering the racetrack on Friday morning at 9 a.m. You see, when the haulers get to the racetrack, they all wait in a parking lot outside of the track first as kind of a meeting point, and then they all take turns getting in line and parking in their assigned spots in the garage area. Once parked, the hauler drivers will start unloading stuff, probably the track equipment and things like that. But you see here at 10:30, team access is permitted. And what that means for us as the road crew is that we're allowed to go inside and start unloading the race car, or any other equipment we might need, and the tire specialist will go ahead and get started on setting up tires for measurement. And if you want to know more about how that works, go see my other video I did on tires. And one thing you might notice here is it says team access is permitted at 10:30, but the garage doesn't open until 11. I know that sounds a little strange, but here's how that works. Team access used to be the time that the tire specialists were allowed in. They got a special sticker on their hard card, which is our NASCAR license, almost like a driver's license with a picture ID and our name and everything on it, that identified them specifically as tire specialists. And then somewhere around a couple of years ago, NASCAR decided to just let everyone in half an hour early. So that's why it says team access permitted, even though the garage is technically not open. And this open time really specifically applies to us. Also, a couple of years ago, if you had a VIP pass and had access to the garage area, you had your own specified time to come in. It was different from the garage opening and closing hours. But nowadays, you can just come in whenever the garage is open. So these hours do apply to those passes, but also to us as well. Now you'll also notice that it says technical inspections happen at 11 a.m. when the garage opens. This gives the team an extra 30 minutes to get the car ready. As it can't load completely ready to go through tech, there are a couple things that need to be mounted on the roof of the race car, and as there's not a lot of room in the hauler for the race car, it is really close to the roof of the hauler. We may not have these things on yet, but it doesn't take very long to put them on. The other thing we need to do is we need to take off our load tires and swap them out for race tires, as we have to have those on before we can go through tech. Now you see here where tech goes from 11 to 4 o'clock. I know that 5 hours may sound like a lot, but there are about 40 cars to do a tech inspection on, and if you fail one part of tech, you have to continue on through that round of tech and then go back to the garage area to fix whatever you need to fix before you can go back again. And I'll go into more detail on tech inspection in a future video, so stay tuned for that if you want to see it. But it does take a while to get through all 40 cars. Speaking of 4 p.m., you might notice that that's also when our practice starts. So once we pass tech inspection, we push the race cars out onto pit road into a stall that they've assigned for us. And then NASCAR will give us the 20 minutes before to adjust these race cars for practice. And you can see here, practice is split up into groups along with a break right in the middle. After practice, we get a 10-minute break, as you might see here in the schedule, in order to make further adjustments to go from a practice setup to a qualifying setup. Once qualifying officially starts, we will gradually start pushing these race cars out in line down pit road in the qualifying order that were prescribed. And this will go from 5:05 to 6 p.m., and that should be plenty of time for all the competitors to make a lap and get their qualifying position. After qualifying is over, the cars will be parked somewhere, usually in the garage area. We will put a car cover on it, and then the cars are what's called impounded. Nothing really happens to them, but we aren't allowed to touch them after this point, with the only exception really being a safety issue. And in any case, we have to get the explicit permission of an official, who will then stand there and watch as we do whatever it is we need to do to the race car. Now, we are able to make other changes on the race car. Like, for instance, if we think that the transmission might be going out during our qualifying lap, they will let us change it. But this is where you'll see that going to the back for unapproved adjustment penalty come into play, as we won't be able to start in our normal qualifying position after we do something like that. Once the cars are impounded, we will go back to the haulers and get ready to head on to the hotel. Now, the hotels we stay at really aren't much fancy. It's kind of your typical Best Western or Holiday Inn Express, something like that. Occasionally there will be nice hotels sprinkled in, but those are usually only because they have a special rate for race teams. But for the most part, it's nothing to write home about. Once we get back to the hotel, we'll get all showered up, and we'll all meet back together in the lobby to go to a team dinner. Again, this is nothing super fancy usually, just some time to spend with our teammates and bond a little. Typically, even the driver will join us. Once that's done, we'll go back to the hotel and get a good night's rest before we have to get up in the morning for the next day. And on Saturday morning, everybody will get up and meet in the lobby of the hotel somewhere around an hour and a half before we need to get to the track. This gives us all time to stop and get breakfast on the way in. Now, since we've already practiced and qualified, there's not a lot that we need to do before we can start the race on Saturday. So you see here the garage opens at 10 o'clock, but I've experienced it where we don't actually get there as soon as the garage opens because we already know what the car is doing and we already have a game plan of what needs to be done, if anything. And we really just don't need much time to prepare for those kinds of things unless we need to get a backup car ready or something like that. About an hour and a half before the specified race time, NASCAR will let us do what's called final adjustments. This is a time when everybody gets to their race cars and they get to do any, final adjustments that they need to do to get the car from a qualifying spec up to race spec. This might include resetting tire pressures, changing the tape on the grille, adjusting the rounds in the rear window, or any number of other adjustments that are a part of a list of approved adjustments that we can make. And again, we are able to fix other issues if we need to, but we will get an unapproved adjustment penalty. We also get the opportunity to start the cars up and get the water and oil nice and warm for when we get ready to go racing. You see, these race cars really don't like to start with cold oil. It doesn't flow super well when it's cold. In fact, we actually have to use a heater to warm the oil tank before we start the race car so that we know it's going to flow well before we even turn it over. So this just gives us a chance to make sure all that stuff is good and all the gauges still work and things like that. Now this time will last about 15 minutes and it is a bit of a frenzy with everybody working on their race car at the same time, not only within your team but also every team within the garage area. But if you have a VIP pass and you're in the garage area for it, it is an interesting thing to see all the things that get tweaked on. And if nothing else, it's just really nice to hear these race cars run. Once final adjustments is over, the cars get pushed out to the grid, ready to start the race. From there, that's usually the time that at least I would take to go put on my fire suit back in the hauler and get everything I need ready to go to pit road for the race. Once I was all set, I would go back to the race car and simply wait. You see here at 2:20 it says driver introductions. If you miss that as a driver, you actually get a penalty for it. So the drivers really have to make sure they're dressed and ready for intros by this time. Once that's done, all the drivers will go from there and straight over to us on pit road where their race car's parked. From there, there's a little time to spend, and that's usually spent by taking pictures, chatting with the driver about strategy, or something like that. Now, 20 minutes before our scheduled race start time is when they let the tire specialists go to work at setting the tire pressures to their final pressure. Since this is something that can change fairly quickly and fairly easily depending on if the sun is on one side of the race car or the other, what the temperature is outside, this is one of the last adjustments we are allowed to make. This race start time, as you may notice if you watch racing, is not actually the time that they throw the green flag or lead everybody off of pit road. This time is more for the TV schedule, but it does tell us when the pre-race ceremony is going to get started. We will all get lined up on pit road up along the race car. They will have a prayer. They will do a presentation of the nation's colors, and of course the national anthem. As a side note, if you've ever seen the Netflix show The Crew, the very first episode shows them all fighting in the garage, and then they hear the national anthem play and they all stop and salute. This is actually not far from the truth. It really doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're in the garage area, and even if it's not your race, and you hear the national anthem start, everybody will stop and salute. Once the national anthem is over, that starts a 5-minute timer for all the drivers to get in their cars. Drivers will hop in, and somebody else, usually the interior specialist, will help them with maybe getting buckled, plugging up radios, and putting the window net up. At the end of that 5 minutes is when they start the command, the part where they say, drivers, start your engines.
Drivers, start your engines!
From there, once they have the command, there's another 2-minute timer between that and when they actually start rolling off of pit road. Once we roll off, we'll run a couple of pace laps, one of which will head down pit road to check our speeds, and then the pace car will duck in and away we'll go. Now once the race is over, all the race cars pull down pit road, and some of the race cars will be set aside to go through tech inspection. This will always be everyone in the top 5 plus a random car. This random car is usually another car somewhere from the top 10, but not necessarily. It can be anyone that NASCAR desires. They can also additionally inspect other race cars if there was an issue they noticed during the race that warrants another inspection to help them verify if penalties need to be assessed. Now these 6 race cars don't all get the same level of scrutiny either. The race winner and typically 2nd and 3rd place will get some level of teardown done to them, and NASCAR will actually inspect individual parts of the race car, while 4th place, 5th place, and the random will just be checked for ride height, weight, and the body scan if they can even check it, depending on the level of damage that race car has. Meanwhile, everybody else is working on loading up into the hauler, and it's kind of a race to avoid being the last one to shut the door on your hauler. It's kind of funny, but this is a mad dash to get everything put away so that we can head home. Don't get me wrong, we love what we do, otherwise we wouldn't do it. But at the end of a long weekend, most of which you spend outside in the sun, you really do just want to go home at the end of it. Once you're loaded up, everybody will get into the rental car, head back to the airport, and anybody that flies on a private airplane will head on out as soon as that plane is full. They don't necessarily have a specified takeoff time, just kind of a planned one, and that plan can obviously change depending on if there's a rainout or a bunch of overtimes push the race long or something like that. This is why a lot of teams will use private charter planes as opposed to flying commercial. We will park the rental van somewhere on the airport property, hand the keys to a representative of the rental company, and then just walk straight onto the airplane. Now on the return trip, there will always be a meal for us, and it's never anything super fancy, maybe a honey-baked ham sandwich or a personal pizza from Pizza Hut, but regardless, it's always a very nice thing to have, because you don't really know when you might get to eat for sure while you're at the racetrack, so it's nice that they provide us with something. And of course, once we're back at the airport, everybody just heads right back into their cars and goes home. Now from the scheduled start time to the time the checkered flag flies is roughly 2.5 hours per race. So in this case, if the race starts at 1, it'll be over around 3:30. From there, it'll take about 45 minutes to load up, maybe another 15 minutes to get to the airport, which puts us at 4:30, another 30 minutes for everyone to get on board, which would be about 5 o'clock, and then a 2-hour flight home, which puts us at 7 o'clock, but we lose an hour because we're going back to the Eastern time zone, which makes 8 o'clock, and from there it just depends on how far away you live from the airport. So even if you don't do tech inspection and everything goes pretty smoothly, from the time the race is scheduled to start to the time you get home is about 7 hours. And this is why sometimes we'll cut some time off of that garage opening time and show up a little bit later, just to make that day a little bit shorter. So you see, our travel to work is a little different from just traveling to work if you work on regular streetcars. But hey, that's just one more thing that makes these stock cars far from stock. Hey, don't forget, if you like what you saw, maybe give the video a like and maybe even subscribe if you want to see more. Don't forget to leave topic suggestions down in the comments below, as that will really help me make sure that I'm bringing you guys the information you want.